I'm moving forward every day, Jesus. I just let him lead the way every second, every minute, every hour of the day. I'm moving with Jesus every day, 24/7. With Jesus every day, 24/7. I'm moving with Jesus. I'm moving with Jesus every day.
Hello again, dear viewer. Thank you so much for tuning in to JC 24/7. If you had logged on last week or put on your television, you would have been blessed, I hope, by the first segment of our well-being culmination, if I should put it that way. We would have been speaking to professionals in the field and getting their perspective on different aspects of well-being. We were previously speaking about different dimensions, the psychological, the spiritual, the social, and today we're going to be going into some other aspects and also talking about techniques and ways in which you and I can cope with in the times that we're living in. So let's begin with the dimension, the emotional dimension. So we have the pastor, the psychiatrist, and we have the teacher educator. I am directing this question. I'm throwing it out to anyone. Just jump in as you feel free. Emotion regulation and management. These two, or I should say it's basically one skill, it has been identified as something that is crucial by mental health specialists in dealing with crises, external crises, as well as personal issues like relationship woes that we often have. Tell me, if in your profession, have you seen this as a skill that people have to regulate and manage their emotions? And how do you think people can develop and hone this skill so that they can be able to cope better? Anybody? Jump in.
Well, okay, so as a teacher, this is what we do because children are learning how to do that. And, when I just started teaching, I would have encounters with children whereby you would speak to them and they would answer you in a certain way. And this would be quite different to how I would answer a teacher when I was going to school. And that would sort of throw me off. But then I began to think about how important it is for children to feel heard and accepted. So when you have an environment of forgiveness, and you need a lot of that when you're dealing with children, and acceptance, I think it allows children to grow and to learn how to regulate their emotions. So that's one thing I've noticed. I'll stop there for now.
Okay.
So I'll pick up from there. Last week when we chatted, I mentioned the importance of parenting in terms of establishing or children, developing children who are able to cope emotionally. And this kind of emotional regulation, I think it actually begins, as Mr. Legault would have said, in childhood. We assume that children know what emotions are, but we have to teach them. We have to teach them. A child may feel angry, a child may feel sad, but they don't know what they're feeling. And they act out their emotions because they're children, and that's what children do. And unfortunately, in our culture, I think it has changed, but we would punish children when they act out their emotions rather than help them to identify and express appropriately the emotions, right? So as they get older, you find that emotions are, one, not identified, and two, they are dealt with either by shutting them down and shutting them out, or they are expressed through these acting out behaviors. Now, emotions, I mean, the good ones we're good with. People do identify the joy and the pleasure and the happiness and satisfaction and so. But it's the negative emotions we're talking about here. And the natural tendency, if you are unable to cope or you don't even identify, is to want to feel good. And there's this part of the brain, the limbic system, a primitive part of the brain, that is all about feeling good. So people have these negative emotional experiences, and even without identifying the emotions, they resort to these feel-good behaviors. And what are we talking about? Alcohol and drugs. Exercise, because there can be good feel-good behaviors that can become excessive. Spending, overproductivity, people who workaholics, people who work, you see? And all of this is in a bid to handle negative emotions that you don't even know you are feeling. Right? And I like to use the example as well. A wife gives her husband the cold shoulder, and she herself doesn't even know why she's so cold and sharp with him until she has to sit and reflect to recognize that he hurt her feelings in some way. And this is how she's acting it out. So emotional regulation, to go back to the question then, has to start with identifying emotions. We have to learn to identify our emotions. We have to sit and think, what am I feeling here? Am I hurt? Am I sad? Why am I hurt? Am I hurt for a good reason? In which case, you deal with whatever it is. But am I hurt because my experience just reminded me of something my father used to say to me? In which case, the way you feel is not legitimate for this situation. And you have to deal with that emotion in a way that allows you to cope without risk and without harm. Yeah?
And including harm to the other person in the relationship.
Yes.
Pastor Samson.
You know, while Doc was talking, it's like everybody's working from a story. We all have a story from which we are working. And some of those stories can very well do some serious wounding. And I'm hearing her say that we need to look back. That's how I see it. It's need for us to look back. Looking back could be a pretty scary thing. And sometimes when we look back, and the end result is we blame, we hide, or we even make excuses to kind of accommodate the brokenness in the now. It will become necessary for us to look back, yes, but avoid those three things. The information got to be had, but we're not doing that in order for us to get an arm to blame someone in order for me to continue my brokenness, for that negative emotion to still stay because I was spoken to that way. That is who I am now, and that's it. So we got to be mindful about blaming, hiding, and making excuses as we do that looking back. But it is necessary for us to look back and see where the wound is coming from. And I love the idea of the teacher and the doc would have spoken about it, family life. You know, in family life is where a number of those wounds are really inflicted. And I've discovered that physical wounds are a whole lot easier to deal with than those emotional ones.
That's true.
You know, and to look back at it and to deal with it could be a hard, long journey. But I've also discovered that there comes a point in every person's life when you have to, as I said before, quit those three things. But if I'm going to quit those three things, what I'm going to look at ultimately is God. Draw the line. That was then. This is now. This is me and God in this war, in this battle. And if this transcendent, eminent God that I spoken about last week is viewed and is held on to tenaciously, then certainly going forward becomes a whole lot more meaningful and possible.
Go ahead, Mr. Eva.
I just wanted to touch on something that the doctor spoke about. That is, well, the drug abuse and substance abuse. Well, we live on a small island. So you tend to run into your students years after the fact. And one concern I have that I carry with me is the effect of drug abuse on young minds and in terms of how they grow up emotionally. Because I feel as if they use drugs to sort of mask certain emotions, and then they never gain the skills to deal with them, and so that when you meet them later on in life, many of them struggle to perform well as adults. I don't know if I'm onto something, but that's how I read it. That's a deep concern of mine.
Yes. And I think a very legitimate concern, because when you resort to something like drugs, you actually do not learn healthy coping skills. So that by the time you stop using the drugs, sometimes as a grown adult, you now have to go backwards and learn those skills that you should have been learning all along. You know? And I want to make a pitch here for seeking professional help. Because Pastor Sampson talked about the looking back and how painful it could be. And indeed, that is so. Thank God, maybe not for the majority of persons, but for some people, the looking back can be painful. And God heals. He's the ultimate counselor. But sometimes you just need that human help as well, you know? Right. And I want to encourage not to reject professional help. But when you seek it from people who are Christ-centered. Because sometimes the help that is recommended is not always consistent with what our Christian values would expect.
So we come back to the point where emotions are not emotion. There got to be a reference point for emotions. We are saying, and those wounds, looking back and such like, become necessary. And I love I think we need to underscore that, and I am underscoring it as a pastor here. Because many a times as spiritual individuals, we tend to minimize, make of little effect the need for a professional who can speak in a manner that can get to the mind. And we just simply want to, as it were, pray it away. That in itself is a poor understanding as to what prayer is really all about now. And so that I think I want to join in with that as we seek for help, look for the professional who can speak to the issue in a meaningful way. But of course, let that professional be one whose eyes and whose heart is all locked in with God just the same.
Yes, so we're definitely talking about coping and how we can rise above these challenges that we have that are so varied and many right now. So let's talk about the simple things that we have as Christians, as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because we're talking JC 24/7, Jesus Christ 24/7. We have this simple, and I say simple, but there's so much packed into it, our health message. You know, so many different simple elements that we advocate as a church. We talk about nutrition, we talk about exercise, we talk about trust in God, we talk about temperance and rest and all of these different things. These techniques that we have, they're so important. Have you seen that they impact people, these simple, taking some sunshine, that they impact the way in which people cope? Because I know for myself, that was definitely an area that I paid attention to during the pandemic in order for me to cope. Just going outside, taking some sunshine, making sure I do some physical activity, getting some fresh air. Have you seen that these simple things help people to cope?
I will jump right into one that really buffer all the others. My trust in God. That's one of a part of our health message for sure. With all the other things that we do, our trust in God. Because regardless to how informed one might be and how told you might very well be, there comes at times in your life situations that soar way beyond what you would have experienced before. And you don't know exactly how to get it done. And you do need to get a shoulder to lean on. You do need a space where you can figuratively die. Where trust You can die knowing that you'll be taken care of. And that's where God fits in. A huge part of our health. The rest that many people may go to sleep but don't find rest because they're not in God. Their mind, they're sleeping, but their mind going all over the place. The doc might be able to talk about that a whole lot more. You know, that rest in God. And, you know, the world look at Sabbath in a negative light many a times because we give them the wrong impression about Sabbath. It's just a group of people don't want to work and such the like. But it's a huge part of our health message, a rest in God.
Correct.
That palace in time with God. Just you and God alone interacting, sharing with God who God is. At the end of that stay with God, there is a spiritual pregnancy that takes place that gives birth to that which you need to face life thereafter.
I feel like you're preaching, Pastor Samson.
I'm sorry if I go that way.
That's okay. We need that.
Oh gosh, yes. But I'm always intrigued when science catches up with God.
You know, there you go.
And this new start principle that we have, it surprised me when I researched it that every element, nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, fresh air, sleep and rest, and the trusting in God, is now documented scientifically as promoting mental health. I was even surprised when I saw diet.
Okay.
And when they described the diet that protects from depression, it's the diet that we endorse, the diet that the Bible says we should use. Fresh fruit and vegetable, avoid all of the meat and the processed foods and so, right? When I said they couldn't possibly have any research to document fresh air and they talk about being outside and the color green. The color green promotes calm and peace and stillness, the trees, the grass, you know. So I think for anyone who might be thinking, yeah, prove it. It has been proven. There are scientific articles that now show that all of these elements are very, very useful in promoting wellness and mental well-being.
We have a treasure in earthen vessels. And sometimes we don't realize how valuable, because I say these things are simple, but they're so profound because they make a very big impact. Let's talk about people being adaptive. Some persons use another word, and perhaps some of you can bring that up. But have you noticed, I'll start this with Mr. Legal. Have you noticed in your area that there are some students, there are some young people who are adaptive, who are looking at the challenge? They're not saying that it's not challenging, they are facing up to it, but they are adapting positively to the challenges in their lives. And what have you noticed is different about them?
Okay, so the thing I think has the greatest impact is if you have a positive peer group. Doing CXC and doing exams, doing school, particularly during the time of the pandemic, was a big challenge for a lot of students. And I found that those who had a really positive peer group, they were able to bounce ideas off of one another. I would often tell them too that they didn't fully appreciate the impact that they could have on one another at times. So sometimes I would say, well, have you checked in with your friends? Have you spoken to them about this? Have you encouraged them to do that? And I think the more that they began to pull together, to talk to one another, and well, as things opened up to even go out together, spend time with one another, that really, the students that found a nice positive peer group, I thought they were able to adapt better and to do better in their exams.
Okay.
From where I sit, I want to introduce the word resilience. You know, yes, adapting is one, but resilience, adapting, and coming out stronger than you were when you first went in. Resilience. And in my space, the spiritual space, to see individuals who are dealing with life and its challenges from God's perspective. People who take the time to to look at in order to understand, that's the looking back. Persons who have a clear understanding of from God's perspective, and they're now relating to it with God. They come out of it not only adapting to the negatives that are there, or I have coped with the negatives. No, they come out with a strength to deal with whatever will come thereafter. I am moving into this space with God. I am dealing with the challenges with God. A resilient person finds strength in God. That word enthusiasm comes alive then. In God, you get your energy. In God, you get that vision. In God, you get what's required. And that's where I see persons adapting or even being resilient, even though we are going through this very challenging period in our lives.
Okay. Dr. Reed, I know you said that by the time people come to you, the situation or the challenge has already been, sort of extreme.
Yes.
But even with those people, have you seen that they are, let's stick with resilient. Have you seen that they are resilient patients that even when they have this challenge or crisis in their life, that they are able to overcome?
Yes, yeah. And it's just as Pastor Sampson said, because even in that setting with persons who are seeking the professional help, what divides the two groups is that faith and trust in God. You really do see it. That spiritual component of the management, because we talked about the multifaceted approach to helping people. So we use the term biopsycho-sociocultural. And in the sociocultural is the spiritual. And persons who embrace the spiritual and include the spiritual as part of their management plan inevitably do better than others. Wow. So I do see it. But I want to mention something, only because over the past several years, it has struck me as such a negative aspect of personality, but one that society tends to nurture and encourage, and that is perfectionism. Perfectionism is something that poor parenting can result in, and I use the term poor parenting not to make parents feel badly, but parents are very well intentioned, but they put this pressure on their children to be good, to perform well, not just to perform well, to excel, to be the best that they can be, which is a well-meaning kind of intention, but it puts so much pressure on the children. And what I found interesting over my years of practice is that while society tends to want to reward perfectionism, it carries with it a burden of anxiety and depression. And the more I thought about it and the more I consulted God's word, perfectionism is a sin. Right, Pastor?
It stems from pride.
Perfectionism is a sin. And not only that, but we can't be perfect without Him.
That's right.
It is only in Him that
That's
we
right.
find that perfect. So if you're striving for perfection in your own strength, that's a losing battle.
That's right.
That's a losing battle.
That's right.
So I just want to mention that, because sometimes, don't get me wrong, there's some good in perfectionism, because perfectionists do well, they excel when you look at high performers and so on, right? But the emotional burden, the psychological burden that goes with it isn't worth it.
Wow. And yet we are coming down to the end again. We will end with this final question. So each of you, I would like you to give some encouragement to our viewers, to persons who may not be managing well, to persons who may feel that this time that we are living in is just a time to give up. What would you say to viewers like that? And also, how would you encourage viewers who are coping and encourage them to continue coping? What would you say? Mr. Legal, you want to start for us?
Maybe the viewers should send suggestions to me. No, here's what I'll say, right? I realized this today, actually. My daughter is not a year yet, and she's been wanting to walk for a long time. So, and it hit me today that every day for several months now, she gets up and tries to walk. She'll pull up herself on things, and you realize that over time, over the months, well, her legs are getting stronger. Mm-hmm. She's more confident when she's standing, wobbling less. And so I realized I should take some of that advice, some of her spirit, and the things that I have to do, the things anyone has to do, you have to do it every day. You can't give up. You have to get up and do it. You have to get up and do it and get up and do it. Sure enough, she'll be walking soon. That's
another ball game.
Yeah, trouble for me, but I really do believe that that's what you have to do. You have to try every day. You have to do it every day. Yeah.
Try every day. I like that.
That's right. Now, what I want to say, I figure Pastor Samson going to see. So I will leave it to Pastor Samson to say it now. Right? Yeah.
Say it all right.
But I would like to leave viewers with the encouragement that these rough times, these trials, there is good that can come from them. Life has trials. We're not going to get away from them. Right. And I think we have established over the last 2 sessions that we've had that a reliance on God and faith and so is the ideal way to cope. But if somebody is looking just for a nice little catchphrase, anybody who's heard me speak before would know that the Serenity Pray is what I recommend to people. Mm-hmm. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. So you have to know what you can change and what you can't. Anytime you try to change someone else, that's an example of something you can't change. You're going to create confusion for yourself. You're going to create more frustration. That's just one example. But God grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. Mm-hmm. And that courage includes what Pastor Samson going to say. And wisdom. Yes. And wisdom to know the difference. Mm-hmm. If we remember that we're going to be hit, but we can cope, I think that we would see much, much less of anxiety and depression in the society today.
And what you just said connects with what Mr. Legal said previously in the other 2 lines, or probably more, of the Serenity Prayer. It says, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, and accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Yes, so that is those 2 things connect very well. Yes. So Pastor Samson?
Someone who is listening to us, I want you to dispel 2 satanic thoughts that are being purported. One, that God would have created this world and now have abandoned it to just run its own course. And there are others who believe that he is in everything and he's equal to everything and therefore he doesn't have the command over everything. Mm-hmm. We are presenting to you a God who is transcendent, a God who is sovereign, controlling all things, a God of love, wisdom, and power. And he's also a God who is immanent, present, involved, want to be involved. And he functioned in those 2 spheres at the same time, transcendent, maintaining his awesome power, and yet want to be in your space in a very personal manner. Note you well, I repeated myself here, nothing comes to you that this loving God is ignorant of. Mm-hmm. He wants what's best for you. He knows what's best, and he can do what's best. Then you can relate to life and its challenges, knowing that God is with you. And nothing comes to you that ought to conquer you, because the eminent God who is so powerful will do the fighting for you. Be still and know that he is God. Mm-hmm.
We just want to thank our panelists today. We want to thank the pastor. We want to thank the psychiatrist. And we want to thank the teacher educator. I have been edified, and I'm sure that you have been as well. If you forget everything, remember to trust in God. He is able to carry you through. So until next time, I wish you a very pleasant day, and I hope that you are able to be well in Jesus' name.